Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, a forum for business owners and senior executives to share the experiences about the elements that drive their success. Your host is Robert Brill, CEO of BrillMedia.co.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Charlie Katz, Executive Creative Director at Bitbean. Thanks for being with us.
Very happy, very interested.
So tell us a little bit about Bitbean, Charlie.
We've been involved by a unique individual named Ephraim Ornstein, who had a instinct predilection for putting things together and a very good heart.
Okay.
And his father was an engineer, and he grew up in that environment with that instinct, that skills, that DNA in his bones. And he was working at a camp for special children. And he saw that what was lacking was a way of coordinating all the different counselors with all the different programs, and to make sure that everything flowed properly and that the communications was correct. So he just sat down and started fooling around and putting together software for that on his own, just by what he knew and what he learned along the way. And he put together a program that was coordinated the whole process of the camp, and it was extremely effective, so that everybody was in sync with the projects that were being undertaken. Because when you're dealing with special ed children, communications and the flow of the timing is not smooth, so to speak, because each child is their own child and the pacing of the child, etc. So he put something very effectively. And in the process that other people came to him and asked him to help them with their software, and that just evolved. And Bitbean created extremely effective software for major league companies in the mortgage industry, in the title industry. That the one mortgage company, they do 5 billion in transactions, one of the largest in the country. And interesting enough, if you ask Mr. Ornstein, he'll say, I'm not a software developer. He's a very good coordinator. He understands it very well. He knows how to, and he's excellent at putting together teams. And that itself has played a tremendous role in knowing how to choose the right people to work on which product, how to choose the right people who could work together, etc. And so it's grown. And it basically, his areas is broad. People from startups to established businesses. And
So
it's
essentially,
a high-end software development company.
yeah, totally.
Software.
So essentially, you're a software house.
Right. Well,
For
custom software, not really. We look at ourselves more as a consulting company. It starts with consulting, and this is very critical. In fact, this is really the heart of it. We are a firm believer that it all starts with the owner of the company. And we want to understand what he's really after. What happens quite often is that clients come to us and they have this idea and they have that idea, and we make them step back and understand what they're really trying to accomplish. We question them about the original vision. What was the intent? What was the purpose? What were you really after and trying to accomplish? And when we do that, what we uncover and what they uncover in a similar fashion is that in the process of building a business or thinking about a business, you often lose direction. You often go off on a tangent because the responsibility of an operating a business has you so busy that you lose sight of original intent. You get to a certain level and you're just focused on the immediate and not the bigger picture. And the problems that you identify and the solutions that you're after aren't really the ones leading to where you want to go. So we are very, how should I say it, very determined to get to the absolute source of the vision and the purpose of the company before we start.
absolutely. Well, exactly. The fastest way to lead a project off track is to give the client free rein and not to provide leadership to the client. Like It's so fascinating because that is applicable to so many different types of businesses, including ourselves. We have to provide leadership to get the project to be done the way the client needs it to happen.
Also, because at some point, our conversations that we have at the high level with the owner of the company, the people that are involved at that level, transfers over to our teams. And our teams are now working on the project, a project manager and software developers, and they have to understand, because at that level, the game changes to a much more practical aspect of exploration. Before anybody sits down and starts toying around with all the codes, etc., we go out into the field and we explore that business. And we explore it from many different perspectives. I call that, it's sort of like when you're looking in that kaleidoscope, and you look at it from many different angles. Okay, so of course, this strategic perspectives, which is that we are looking at it from different departments, because software is a nerve structure of a company. It radiates out, and it touches upon everything. What happens often that we find is that a client comes to us with a specific problem, and they're looking for a solution for that specific problem. Okay, we could come up with a solution, but that solution may not resolve other issues going on, and in fact may complicate other issues because they're not linking the way they need to link in order to make everything be coordinated and work together. So before we actually get involved in creating the software, our teams go out into the field. They meet literally with the executives and the operators of many different departments, depending how big the company is, what kind of company it is, and explore with them what their needs are, what their problems are. And then when we come together, we're able to create a whole roadmap and see that if what you really want, starting back to the vision, what you really want to accomplish, well, it happens to be that there's another department which plays a significant role that's being overlooked in getting to that point. What's also being overlooked is that when you think about this problem in this department, what the influence it has on the other departments.
Right.
So we look at the whole picture and we coordinate everything, and then we begin to do the work, and it works very effectively because
So
we have a very clear map.
so Charlie, so one of the things that's important here is, I think what I'm hearing you say is that the client will come to you with a solution
With a
that
need for a solution.
they're looking for a specific solution, but
Right.
they haven't been able, because they don't have the skills, they don't have your knowledge to be able to actually define a solution that actually fulfills on what they actually are solving for, rather than that one unique software thing that needs to be built. It's fascinating. I like there's so many parallels to that, to the advertising business, because we often have clients come to us and they'll say, "Hey, we want to run, I'm making it up, Facebook ads." But then we need to backtrack it. Why do you want to run Facebook ads? And what are you looking to accomplish? And is Facebook ads the right place? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. So it seems like the consultative white glove approach for your business is actually incredibly critical to a successful endeavor. How often, let me ask you a question. How often, like, what's the scope of your engagement? Like, how long are your engagements usually when
Oh, okay.
you start?
Depends on the project. Could be for a year. We do it in stages. Depends how it really depends on the project. We could do something. I would say the shortest period is probably 2-3 months, but it could be a long period because it depends what they need. And sometimes we're revamping the entire system. We're creating a new system, and so it really depends. We do good work. We're at the high end. We're not. We have many advantages that are critical. So let me explore some of them. I think one of them which I touched upon is teamwork. And teamwork is, and I think the best way is, I'll give you an analogy. I wrote an ad about this, and I did a series of ads about teamwork, starting with Thomas Edison. We all know that Thomas Edison created, I think it's over 1,000, has over 1,000 patents. What we don't know is he didn't do it himself. He had a team. Everything that he did was through a team. And he called them his smuckers. Now, he may have used S's or whatever, but he called them his smuckers. And he developed the concept of teamwork, which is still used in science, in medicine, and industry. He was the one who laid the foundation for the need for teamwork. The other thing that I touched upon, and one of the other points I made in the ad, is that, and a very critical, a very interesting story. In the search, in the how should I say it? To reach the South Pole, when the explorers went out, there were two people. There was Robert Scott from Britain, from England, and there was Ronald Amundsen from Norway. Scott set off with 100 people on his team. Ronald set off, I believe it was 16 or 19. I think it was 16, but it could have been 19 people on his team. Amundsen discovered the South Pole 2 weeks before Scott reached it. So he had 100 against 19, and the 19 won. On top of which, most of Scott's team died along the way, including Scott himself, died in his search. And the reason is as follows. Scott had 100 people, but he did not do any investigation onto the skills of the people and how they complement each other. Ronald here chose every person on his team exactly for what their skills were and how they work together. So the smooth operating team. And in my mind, I always picture, because I lived in LA many years, and you probably remember those years as well, when you have Showtime with the Lakers, when it was just one smooth operation going down the court. I was thinking about certain videos I saw with Magic going down the center and Worthy going down the right lane, and everything just operated. And that's so super critical. That's often overlooked. And the difference is that quite often companies call teams, but they don't understand what a team is. They want a software team, but they don't really understand what the team is supposed to bring to the project. Their skill set, their working ability, their perception of understanding what the project is, and also how they work and complement each other. And particularly, there is benefit offshore, certainly financially, etc. But there's another aspect also, it's the communications. And when you have somebody here that you communicate, that's also very important. So we take great pride in the teamwork. We take great pride in putting together and choosing the right people to work within the company and putting together the right team.
Operational excellence, process,
Right,
standard
right,
operating procedure,
right,
I imagine, is
right,
all part of that.
right.
So, in your role as a executive creative director, what do you tell us about, like, what your responsibilities are? I mean, the goal of this podcast is to really hear about stories of growth and scale. And we connected over the Authority magazine publication, and that we had, and I appreciate you publishing that interview on the Bitbean website. Um, just I want to learn more about, like, some of the things you've done to grow Bitbean, and you spent many years on Madison Avenue. Tell us a little bit about.
Okay,
We
so
can go wherever you
I-
want to go.
I'll step backward because most of my career was in Madison Avenue, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. Um, Actually, interesting enough, I started knocking on doors during the recession, so it was a lot of knocking, and I would still have bruised knuckles trying to get in. But fortunately, my portfolio got me in, and I was not even a junior. And I had to thank God, a God given talent. I was creative, not just a writer, I was very creative, and they saw that. And you could get into the door, but it, you have to prove yourself every day. You have to be able to create results. I was fortunate, I was very creative and at the same time very naive about advertising. All I wanted to do was be the best writer in the world. I didn't care about checks. I didn't care about anything. I just wanted to be the best writer. And what I found out that there's a lot of politics in agencies, which was not my personality, not my temperament. But also there was something that I struggled with. I wrote a campaign for Wilkinson Razor Blades way back when, that the creative director, executive creative director, so it was the best campaign they ever had saw. I still remember that. I was a junior writer. We went up to present it to the president of the agency, who happened to have been English. Now, Wilkinson in England is second to the Queen. It has a long history because it was there at the charge of the Light Brigade. It's, it's part of the tradition of England. And I remember him looking at the commercials and he said, I will never allow humor in a Wilkinson commercial. Now, my style was humor, and we're in America, and humor is very big in America, and we do not have the tradition and the history of Wilkinson. And we were up against track two, Gillette, so we had really good competition. But he nixed those commercials. And I remember walking away from his office and talking to my creative director, who was taller than me. So I looked at him and I said, David, you hired me for my creativity, and this is what happens. I don't want to work on the campaign. He looks down and very softly says to me, you know what that means? I said, what? He says, it means you're quitting. I said, no, that's how bad. The point I'm getting at is that the decision process, I had to learn to understand what it was about and how it worked. But I was fortunate that particular David, who just unfortunately recently died, a very close friend, was brilliant in marketing. And he fleshed out my understanding of the marketing side of the business. You learn from the trenches. You learn being there. As an example, within the first months that I was at my first agency, Dancer, which became part of Saatchi Saatchi, I wrote a campaign, and the supervisor above me is looking over my shoulder, and he says to me with real, he says to me, Charlie, you know what you got here? You know what you got here? And I remember looking up to him, and I said two things to myself. Creatively, I knew what I had there because I was creative. But from a marketing standpoint, I didn't see it the way he saw it. I didn't understand it yet. So I was fortunate in this growth period that I had at both agencies of really getting a handle. And then one day I woke up, I was in the West Coast, and I'm lying in bed, and I said, advertising is not about creativity. It's not about awards. It's not about money, even though it's all about that. It's really about emptying warehouses. That's your responsibility. And when I understood that, it became the greatest game in town. And in LA, I was with an agency, an unknown boutique agency that we did unbelievable. We were hitting grand slams left, right, and center. We were well known. We took CNR, you may remember, a $50 million annual company to $150 million. We took an airline, Air Cal, owned by Paul Allen, that was about to go out of business. It was $40 million in debt. 3 years later, it was sold to American for about $250 million. We loved the underdog. We turned down Procter and Gamble. And the essence of it is that we were out to win. We were like the Lakers. We wanted to win, and we knew what it took to win, and how to motivate. How not say motivate? That's the right word, but how to tell the story in such a way that the consumer bought the story, understood the value of it to him, and would choose it over the competition. So, and then I won awards. I was nominated for Clio. I won the New York Advertising Awards, and so on and so forth. But I have to tell you that the biggest reward is hearing that the cash register is ringing. In fact, an interesting story, our agency was known as a retail agency. Now, retail is not, as people think, in store, and that's one aspect of retail. Retail is anything where the consummation happens quickly and results happen quickly. So that means that we had fast food, we had airlines, and so where whether people are buying tickets to get on that plane or not. You could judge it very quickly, the effect of the advertising. So one day I meet a friend of mine, the creative director on United Airlines. And he says to me, Charlie, I don't want to be in your shoes. That was interesting. I said, why not? He says, I created a commercial for United Airlines. It's beautiful commercial. It's a beautiful, everyone likes it. Does it work? Is it working? Nobody knows, but they're happy. He says, you're in retail. The cash register doesn't ring in 3 days. Everybody knows. I don't want to be there. And I said to myself, but I love it because when the cash register rolls, you've done your job. That's what you're here for. That's what you're paid for. That's what advertising is about. If you want to write a novel, write a novel. You want to write a screenplay, write a screenplay. But if you want to write copy, then you have to produce results. And when you produce results, then you know that you're playing in the big leagues, and you're reading the challenge. So,
What?
so
So Charlie, let me ask you a question. For those of us, in 2020, everyone can be a media business. Ultimately, we can
Right,
create the podcast, we can get on video. Like
right.
there aren't barriers. What are some, and I get it, right? Like having the creative talent is a whole different type of skill than being able to do something and do it well are two very different things. What what would you tell someone, a marketer like myself, who's I'm not a creative person, but we do go to market with various things, and we do the best we can with our creativity, and we have other talents in house and out out and about who we work with. What are some principles that we should know about writing copy or developing content that you can share with us?
Okay, so let me step back before I touch on, because there's one point about creativity that is not understood. Uh, and the synonym for creativity is curiosity. Creative people are very curious. I wrote a whole article about it, and I quoted so many ad people. Will Bernbach, even what's his name, Albert Einstein. He said, I have no talent. I'm just insatiably curious," because your creativity is fed by curiosity. Because the way creativity works is really you're pulling in other ideas and other sorts, and you're finding a fresh way to look at your problem. I'm an insatiable reader. I'm curious about everything. I was born with that curiosity, and it's one of my joys of life because every day life is interesting to me. I could walk down the street and look at the architecture and wonder about it. I could sit at a cafe and observe people and wonder about them. But so that's the root. But let's talk about the principles that you want. I think the two principal caveats that are totally immutable, and that if you're interested in being effective, they have to be incorporated is caveat number one, and it's expressed the way I'm saying it: we act upon emotions, we validate with intellect. No other way of putting it, and it's just written up, by the way, recently in one of the major, not Wired, the other one, Fast magazine, that yeah, that we think that we're logical people who have feelings when we really are people with feelings who think logically. The feelings come first. If you don't deal with the emotion, you're not going to reach the person. The intellect and the processing of evaluating through logic does not inspire any action. That's not the nature of the human being. We're emotional beings. Anything that we do, if we look at a car, we may have a laundry list of why we want what we need in a car. We need mileage, we need size, depending on our family. It has to meet our budget. But when we actually choose a car, we have to respond to that car. We have to feel. I remember years ago when I was raising my family in LA and I needed that family car, a safe car. I was looking at an Audi. I'm sorry, at what's the Swedish car? Volvo. At that time, it was about as boxy and as boring as you can imagine. And I remember saying to myself, I can't see Charlie Katz in that car. A friend of mine turned me on to an Audi, and I was in love from day one, and it was the greatest thing. So that emotional thing, now, on paper, if I only look paper logically, they're about equal, and maybe the Volvo was a better deal financially, but it didn't spark me. You need that emotional connection. You have to, now, there are many things that trigger the emotion, and there's a whole plethora of things that trigger emotion. And even when you're dealing on B2B, it's still emotion. People forget, we look at the person behind the desk, he's got authority, he has power, he's wearing a tie, he's got his title on the door, people respect him, and we think he's some kind of a logicon, like an automaton. He just does things the way he's not. He's the same person, he has the same fears, and I'll give you an example. Years ago, a friend of mine said he had a friend who came up with a software for reservations that American Airlines loved at that time, whatever it was, and that it was presented to the marketing director, whoever, and he was going to present it to the board. What they're going to decide on it. And his friend was already clipping coupons. He saw himself retired, etc. I said, "Tell him to hold back. I'll tell you what's going to happen at that table. He's going to present it. Across the table, someone is sitting who hates his guts. They've always had arguments in the company. So that's a no right there. The other side of the table, there's somebody who's okay, but he has his own project that he wants to put, so it's competing with him. The third person over there is what you call just insecure and he's waiting to see what everybody does. And the head, the final decision maker, knows that he's got to talk to someone on top. So he's sort of hemming and hawing. So you're a guy who say, what do I need this battle for? And he moves on to a different project. And sure enough, they never heard from them again. Now, maybe it didn't exactly happen that way, but I'm trying to point out that we are human beings, and emotions play the most critical role. So that's number one. The second thing that we have to keep in mind is that benefits sell, features don't sell. Another critical thing, and you see it often in advertising where people list. So let's step back for a moment and ask ourselves a simple reason: why are you in business? I always ask, startups and clients, why are you in business? So of course they're in business because they want to make money and they have to pay bills. So I say to them, that's interesting because that the reason why why a customer comes to you is because he wants to help you pay your bills. He's worried about your mortgage. He's worried about your son's college education. So he's going to choose you to give his business over everybody else. So then a little bit of look of recognition comes on the face. I said, let me explain to you why he comes to you. He comes to you because he has a problem and he believes that you have a solution to his problem. That's why he comes to you. So the question really is the problem. So the features say that you have what do you call it? Something that can help you with this problem. But that's not why he came to you. What he came to you is for the problem. And I give you an example. I wrote for 6 years a marketing column in a local magazine here in New Jersey. And I went throughout at the audience. I showed them 10 ads for tires. And they were good. Everyone was a creative ad. I asked them to choose which one they felt was the best ad. And I got responses. And I said, let me tell you which is the best ad. Every ad would show you, let's say, holding the road in rain and sleet and so on. They're all about safety in that respect, how it performs, about the treads. I said, I don't know anybody ever walked down the street and pointed out to his wife and said, boy, look at that tire's treads. We got to get that tire. It must be great treads on the road, okay? I said the campaign that I thought was brilliant and most effective was a Michelin, what's riding on your tire and showing that little kid in the tire. What you really want is you want to get home safely. You want your wife to get home safely. You want the child to get home safely. If you had a car that had no tires, it was a hydro car, just like a hydroplane boat, and it floated on the air, you wouldn't suddenly say, but I need to have tires, or let's go buy tires and hang them on the wall. You wouldn't even think about it. So the point is, you've got to understand the problem, what it really wants. And the classic expression that's often quoted is no one buys a quarter-inch drill. They buy a quarter-inch drill bit. They buy a quarter-inch hole. They want to make a hole, so they're looking for the bit. So to make that hole, what they really want is a hole. If somebody came along and made a hole for them, they would never show up at Home Depot. So you have to keep that in mind, what they want, and your message and the copy has to lead to that. It has to express the solution, and that's where the validation comes in through your features. So now, if I told you that this screen has these pixels, and you give me all types of electronic terminology, it's meaningless to me. Another example, I think a good example of one I always like to use for whatever reason, is that if I tell you a BMW suspension has the same titanium metal in the suspension that Stealth Bomber has in the Stealth Bomber, you'd be impressed. But what? Okay, it's nice to know. But if I told you that the BMW could take a curve at 80 miles as if it was on the straightaway because it has that type of titanium metal that holds it firm, then you'd sit up and say, aha, now it's interesting, okay? It's translating the features to the benefit that they want in an emotional way. That is the essence of good advertising, good copy. If you go back, and I always like to refer to the great ads of the past, because I think they're number one, nobody ever beat them. I think they were the launch of the modern era, even though they were back in the 60s. But these people understood it. I mean, going back to the Volvo, to the VW Lemon. But let's go to the very famous campaign, which probably most listeners do not know, but I study advertising, so it's very firm in my mind. Avis, we try harder. And it's a brilliant story. in the Avis We Try Harder campaign. At that time, Hertz, which it still is, well, just went out of business, but until it went out of business, it was a premium car rental company. And it appealed, of course, to people with expense accounts and corporate expense accounts, so they weren't around about the cost. And it gave you superior, gave you premium service. Behind that, you had a whole bunch of car rentals. You had National, you had Dollar, you had all these budget, you had all these companies. Avis was all one of them. The brilliant people at Doyle Dane came over the campaign. It was called Avis, We Try Harder. We're number two, so we have try harder. It was brilliant. It was brilliant on so many different levels. And there's a reason, which I'll say for the end, why it was beyond brilliance. We Try Harder was expressing the idea, therefore we have to do more for you. And they showed it in the ads. And they said, it's important for us because if we want your business, we know we've got to work harder. So we'll make sure the car is perfectly clean. We'll make sure it's available and all the things that you wanted. But they couched it in an emotional way, in a very human way. And the emotion was on many levels, one of which is Americans love the underdog, and they position themselves as the underdog. We're number two. We Try Harder. It was brilliant. And it was brilliantly effective. But it was effective, and this is where creative strategy comes in for another reason that I saw once, and it's very rarely discussed because everybody focuses on the brilliance of the ads themselves. That Avis was never really competing or trying to compete with Hertz. They couldn't. Hertz had more locations. Hertz had the airports, had all the advantages. What they wanted to do was separate themselves from everybody else. So that if you didn't think of Hertz because you couldn't afford, because it was your own business and you don't have an expense account, or the boss doesn't let you spend that money, well, the next thing to go was Avis, and you would not think about dollar, you would not think about budget, and so on and so forth. So the strategy, the creative strategy, was critical to how the whole campaign together and why it was so effective. But it was an emotional campaign. It appealed to us emotionally and understanding that we're getting something we're being treated very special. It promised us the same treatment of being a VIP that Hertz promised to the VIPs. And it turned us into a VIP. It made us feel special that they're giving us all this wonderful attention, and we believe them was very credible because they're number two. They got to do that. So that emotion was found. The end benefit, and which is what I want, is I want a car waiting for me, and I want to make sure that there's no whatever in the car, et cetera, et cetera. It was perfect. It's a perfect campaign of everything that I've expressed. So advertising is human psychology, and human psychology, and this goes back to that period. This is quite interesting because today we're so far from that we don't understand what took place. But those ads came out at the time of the Creative Revolution, which took place in the 60s. Now, until then, advertising was very straightforward. It's almost scientific. Procter and Gamble, Colgate, and they relied heavily on research. And the research, even till today, with Procter and Gamble and Colgate, and I worked there on Colgate accounts, will tell you what should be in the copy. They would almost dictate to you because they found in the research that this word and that word works. Then, and it was a very waspy industry. You came out of Dartmouth, you came out of Harvard, and you went into that. In the 60s, it broke loose because a lot of ethnics came in, Jews, Italians, every type of ethnic came in, and they brought their own culture, their own way of thinking, their own rebellious nature, their own, they were not WASP and they don't mind sticking it to everybody. And so they broke the rules. And they put a greater emphasis on trusting their own instinct of being able to relate to people. So, I mean, one of the side stories, very famous, again, it's historical, is Jerry Delfamino, when he was working on Panasonic. At that time, it was a new company relative in America. And I can say this because the book had this title and he made it famous, but when he made his presentation within the agency, the headline was Panasonic, from the wonderful folks who gave you Pearl Harbor. Okay. Now, it was that attitude, but it was that attitude, okay? It was that attitude of like, let's break it. Let's push the envelope. Let's see how far. Now, of course.
What year was that?
Yeah.
What year was that?
It was sometime in the 60s or 70s. I have to look back. But I'll tell you something. That title was his book, and it made him world famous, and it helped launch his agency. He was a very creative guy, and so on. I'll tell you another story just to show an example. George Lois, who was also a great art director of that period. I again, like I said, I'm a very good student of advertising. So he was also from that period, and he had a small Jewish account, Manischewitz matzahs. Matzahs is what they provide on the Passover holiday. It's a year-round. It's like a cracker, and it's year-round. But Passover, a particular time that everybody has it. And he wanted to run the ad and have the headline in in like Jewish font, in a Hebrew font. That would be English words, but with a Hebrew style. And the owner of the company, a nice little Jewish man, he's worried about it's too Jewish, he can't do that, because he's trying to appeal to everybody and he's afraid too ethnic. George Lois, and on the fifth floor, goes over to the window, opens the window, and he says, "If you don't run that campaign, I'm jumping out the window." This guy, literally Jewish guilt, got so scared. No, I'll run the campaign, And it was very successful. But it was that attitude that it was loose, it was free, it was like, but it was relied on, and this is critical, this is the point I'm trying to make. It relied on the ability of the talent, the art director and the writer, to instinctively, as human beings, being able to understand what humans were feeling and why they would prefer want a product, what the problems are, and how to translate into a language that they want. They didn't need research. Until today, agents like Wyden and Kennedy, Goodby, Silverstein still work in that method, okay? They want you to be creative, and it's what you bring to the table that makes it happen. Now, at that time, one of the things took place that was a radical change, which is Bernbach, Bill Bernbach switched the whole mode of advertising. Until then, it was the copywriter was king. He would write the copy, he'd get the marketing brief, he'd write the copy, and then he'd hand over to the art director to make the visuals. So the art director was like a pair of hands. Bernbach changed that. He said it's teamwork, and both of them work together. So during my career, which I was ready after that, and I was ready into place, I always worked with an art director. And it's like a relationship in marriage. You have your fights, you argue, you scream at each other, but somehow something very good comes out of it. Now, I'm not a wild person. I fight very much what I believe in, but I don't believe in force. But I will say one time I still remember that the producer got involved in telling the director of the commercial what it was about. And the director's talking to me, and he's telling me, okay, I said, where did that come from? That's not our strategy at all. What do you want to do that? He said, well, the producer told me this. So now the producer has nothing to do with the marketing and creative strategy. He's here to put together the production team and make sure everything's coordinated. So I went over to the guy and said, what is going on here? And he started telling me, I said, well, that's not, that didn't come out of the client, didn't come out of anywhere. So he says, I said, come in here. And we went into the conference room, and he was still staying firm. I literally picked up a chair and threw it at him. Now, the only good thing for me, that while I'm talking to you, I'm not, behind bars still, is that chair weighed a ton and it went about 1 inch as far as I could throw it. But the agency was battles. I mean, you believed in something, you fought for it, and it brought out the best.
Charlie, as we wrap up, I want to ask you, tell us about the marketing you're doing for Bitbean. Like, tell us about your.
Well, what I do is a lot of it is behind the scenes, because I'm not involved with the software. What I do is I speak particularly honestly and sometimes to the project managers about the intent of the client, and I try to bring that purpose into it. That because ultimately it's who they're talking to. At the end of the day, software is a communications platform to reach out to the end user. So, what does the end user want out of this service? Okay, it's a vehicle for that end user being able to solve his problem, right? We use software. We go to a website because we're looking for something, right? So, what am I looking for? And therefore, what do I want the map of the map site of the website to lead me where? What intent is it? What am I going through? And so I get behind the scenes and I explore the psychology of the end user. And I do that, and I'm also speak a lot with Mr. Arnstein about clients and what their needs are, and we evaluate it from that standpoint. So it's bringing, I would say, this Madison Avenue understanding of human psychology and interpreting it from an advertising viewpoint into building software. Now, the teams are very good at that as well. And I am not in any way the single voice. The teams are excellent in understanding it, but real work today, and as it should be always, is teamwork in the sense of hearing from different perspectives. It's when you see somebody else's viewpoint and you either argue with it or you agree with it, but together you shape something that is right. So I am another voice in helping shape what the viewpoint should be.
That's fascinating. I really like that. It's our time is coming to a close here, Charlie. So, if people want to reach out to you and Bitbean, how can they find you?
Okay, Charlie K, Charlie at Bitbean, bitbean.com. Charlie K at bitbean.com. And our website is bitbean.com, so they could see our full story over there, our case histories, how we work, and everything we discussed. Meet the team members, meet Mr. Arnstein, it's all there. Plus, as you mentioned, I have a blog called CEO Speaks, and I interview people like yourself, people who are heads of companies. I find it very intriguing. We started a podcast. I love it. I think I'm maybe probably like you as well. We're the most fortunate people in the world. We meet wonderful people. We learn so much. Every day, practically, that we do it is a new insight, a new something else that we walk away with. It's like education and life all wrapped up in one. And I'm very grateful that this turn came to me.
You bring that up, and I agree because one of the best parts about doing this podcast is I get to ask people like you, really interesting, smart people, things that I want to know that will directly affect my business. Like, I'll give you a case in point. We're turning on a new lead magnet, which is about how to create effective lead magnets and market them so you get a constant stream of leads.
Right.
And literally for the last 2 days, I've been working on filming a 1 or 2 minute intro for the landing page, and I cannot get it right. I have the copy down,
Right.
but I cannot get the filming of it right and the editing of it right. I'm not emotional enough.
Right.
It's a little
Right.
too dry. But now, as we're talking, I think I'm actually going to change at least the intro to focus much more on the emotion. So it's just one small example of how
Exactly.
great it is to talk to someone like you and just
Yeah.
get the insight directly from the source.
And you're saying something that I often say to people, particularly in marketing. I say, it's a game of inches. And every insight gets you closer to the goal. Sometimes you get this big vision, but usually it's that small detail that suddenly gets you where you want to go. And that's what I love about the podcast, what I love about the interviews, what I love also about the reading they do. Sometimes I'll come across a quote someplace and I'll buy the book just because I want to read that chapter because I learned so much from that chapter. Whatever I spent on the book is well worth it. It's being open to grow, being open to learn, and being open to life, being curious.
Charlie Katz, Executive Creative Director at Bitbean, thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay, thank you for having me. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it very much. Have a great day.